Okay, so we're on Samach Tes Amud Beis. Um, Amar Rava. I think we're up to Amar Rava. Shaila Lish L'mem L'chavri. About 8 lines down.
Oh, yes.
Amar Rava. Shaila Lish L'mem L'chavri. Hail Chadal L'Zuzi. Take these 4 zuzim. Osve L'planya. Zuzi. And Reuven says to Shimon, here's 4 zuzim, and please lend my friend Levi, lend him 100 zuz. So that's not a problem. In this case, Shimon is lending money to Levi, and Reuven is the one who's paying the ribis or the inducement to Shimon. So since it's not coming from Levi, who's the borrower, it's not a problem. It's let's say Reuven says to Shimon, here's 4 zuzim, go tell Levi to lend me money. So even though Reuven, who is the lender in this case, is the one who's paying the money, he's not paying it to the lender. He's paying it to basically an advocate on his behalf. My time is Char Amira Kashakel. He's getting paid. The money that Shimon is getting is not a ribis. It's rather money that he's getting in order to advocate on Reuben's behalf. Kihad Abba Mar Breder Papa, like Abba the Mar, the son of her Papa, have a shakel ugna the kira mikiroi. He would take pieces of wax from people, and he would then tell his father to lend those people who gave him the wax, they should give him money. Good morning. So they said to the Rabbanan said to her Papa, is your son eating ribis? Meaning he's getting this wax in return for telling you to lend money. Amlu kol ki ravina risa nechel. That's not a problem. This ribis you can eat. Like also Torah, ribis abam midlevelam lemalva. You only Torah only acid paying ribis from a loiva to a malva. Hacha skara mirika shakel b'shari. Like we just said, that's just asking someone to give ribis, and it's not a problem. At the Mishnah, on Mesamach Tes Amud Beis. So the first part of the Mishnah we had brought on back on Amana. Shamin para v'chamar v'chol davar shu oisav oichel lemechta. So this is back to our din. We're talking about a standard iska, right? Where Ruvain, where let's say Shimon gives a paro or chamar to Ruvain, and it's Shimon is the owner of the paro and the chamar, and he says that you should give half of the you Ruvain are going to be responsible for half of the damage that happens to this animal, and you're going to get half of the profit. So essentially, Shimon is lending Ruvain, half of it he's keeping in his rishus, and Reuven is taking care of it for him, and half of it he's lending to Reuven, and Reuven is going to be the managing partner and take care of it, and Reuven's going to get to keep half of the profit. So the problem is that Reuven is working on Shimon's half on behalf of Shimon, and that l'chayra should be treated as ribis. So the Gemara says, Kol davar shu oisav oichel, it's not a problem, because Reuven, while he's watching this animal, is able to use it to work in the fields, so he's getting paid for his work of taking care of this animal and causing it to go up in value on behalf of Shimon. So whenever the animal is oisav oichel, when it works, that work is in payment for the managing partner, for the working partner, for his labor. Malkum shenagu. Then we had said another din on the first amud. Malkum shenagu lachlikas havladus miyad cholkin. A place where the din is where the minig is that they immediately are chaylik any vladus, which we said before included a certain amount of time. maybe 30 days or 3 months for small animals and 50 days for large animals. But essentially, quickly after the animal is born, it has to be divided. And if it's not divided, then we said, then it's as if there's a new iska on that animal. So those places where they have that din, the chalik miyat. But some places have the minute that it remains in the iska, and the managing partner continues to, like, he basically grows. He takes care of the herd, and the herd includes some babies, and he takes care of the babies and brings them up until they decide to split up the iska. Like we said again on Amud Aleph, when you have a calf together with its mother, or a young horse, a colt, together with its mother, in that case, the animal will generally won't require extra payments for schlepping around the animal, because the small animal will follow the larger animal. And we ask, but it still needs some help. And we answer that he uses the glalim, the working partner gets the glalim. And again, all of these are ways that the animal provides that it doesn't constitute extra work that the managing partner is doing for the investing partner, which would be ribis. The Mishnah concludes, and this is where the Gemara is going to pick up, because we already explained the first part of the Mishnah. A person can add extra money to his sada, and he's not going to be chayav mishum ribis. The Gemara is going to immediately explain what that means. Tanu Rabbanan, mafres al sadei ve'eni chayshish mishum ribis. Ketzad, what does that mean? If Ruvain rented a field from Shimon, and the pay was going to be that Reuben was going to pay Shimon. He's a renter, right? It's not a loan; it's a rent. So the made-up rent is going to be that he's going to pay him 10 kur of chitim, a large amount of chitim every year. But Reuben says, I'm not a rich man. I have to go now and buy seeds, and I'm going to have to plow the field, and I'm going to have to fix it up. I have to uproot the trees. A lot of work to be done on the field. So Reuben says, in addition to you renting me the field, also give me 200 zuz, and I'm going to use it to improve the field that I rented from you. And in return for you lending me this 200 zuzim, I'm going to increase the rental from 10 kur to 12 kur. Now this sounds like ribis, right? He's saying, lend me 200, and in return, I'm going to pay you extra rent that I wasn't obligated to do. Mutter. It's mutter. And we'll see from the context of the Gemara, the reason it's mutter is because Reuben is taking this money and plowing it literally back into the field. He's going to invest it in the field. So even though he's paying Shimon more money per year, but it's a better field. So now it becomes, when he puts in the 200 zuz, now it becomes a field that's worth 12 kurim. But when a person does the same deal, he rents a store, or he rents a ship, and then he asks for money, that you can't do, because then the person is just going to use it to buy inventory. Inventory is not improving the ship or the store. Now, it's not always true what you said, that you can't increase the rental in return for a loan, because sometimes a person will add on to the rental in return for a loan, lots of batsura, because he's going to co-paint it. He's going to make the store more palatable. So therefore it will be worth more. A painted store is worth more than an unpainted store. Svina lasses lo yiskaria, or a svina to fix the mast. Chanas lasses batsura, so the tzavu ba'inshi. So Chanus, when he puts in pictures, when he paints it, people will like it more and it will be rented for more. And when you make a mast for a ship, given the Shapira Askira Tvei, Agra Tvei, since it has a better mast, it could go faster, it will be rented for more. Svinasa. You have a svina. Good morning, Rafal. So, we're on the Samach Tes Amid Beis, right before, 2 lines before the wide line. So a svina. When someone rents a svira, well, we're going to see whether it's a rental or not. Svina. Amarav agra upagra. A person who is renting a svina can take on himself both agra, that he's going to pay rental, upagra, and he also takes upon himself that he's responsible for damage if the ship sinks. Now this is problematic. Generally, in taking upon yourself responsibility for something means that it's not a rental, it's a loan. Right? Normally in a rental, the din of schirus is that you're chayiv for gneva v'aveda, you're not chayiv for einsin or for mesamachs malacha. So he's taking upon himself, he's making it more like a shayil. When he says, I'm going to be responsible for an einus, if a ship sinks is an einus. But he's also taking a rental. So if you're paying a rental, that sounds like, right? You always have this, we don't think about it so much, but there's a fine line between a rental which you're certainly allowed to rent something, and a she'ela and borrowing something with ribbis. And the distinction is whether you're responsible for what happens to the object. If you're taking upon yourself that you have to return the object from Einstein, that sounds like a she'ela, that sounds like you're borrowing, and then your rental that you're paying is recast as an interest payment as opposed to a rental payment. So these two things are somewhat at tension to say, Svina, you could be both, you could pay a rental and take upon yourself responsibility. And this is going to be like the next Amid, the tension between the idea of someone taking upon himself responsibility for losses. This is what we just said. If he's paying a rental, then he shouldn't be responsible for the losses. A rental is only a rental if he's not taking upon himself responsibility if the thing if it sinks in the ocean. And he pagra, and if he's responsible for it sinking, lo agra, then it's not an agra, rather it's a ribbis payment. Shasuk Rav did not have a response. He said, you're right. I don't know why this is allowed. Amr of Sheshus. In my time of Shasuk Rav, why was Rav quiet? He has a response. Did not learn this price. We learned one is not allowed to be makabel tzoim barzel Yisrael. We said it's a Tanya, but it's really the Mishnah on Ayin Amid Beis, which we're going to hopefully be learning a little bit in a couple of minutes. But the Mishnah says one cannot be makabel take an object from Yisrael with tzoim barzel, meaning we have tzoim barzel in the context of an isha when she gets married. She has nichsei tzoim barzel, which means that she gives it to her husband, and her husband has to fully be responsible for anything that happens to it. If it gets destroyed, he has to pay her the amount of what it was she brought in. And this is the same thing, where someone takes a pikadon, and he says that whatever happens to it, I'm going to return it to you. I'm taking responsibility. If it gets destroyed, you can't do that, because then we're talking about this is talking about in an iska situation. So Rashi says, if our classic iska, where they divide up, one person provides the capital or the property, and the other one provides the work, and they divide the profits half and half. If they make it in the form of a tzoyin barzel, where the working partner has to compensate the investing partner for anything that happens under any circumstances to the property, then the whole thing then it's not really an iska anymore. At that point, the whole thing becomes a loan from the investing partner to the working partner. In our case, in the regular iska, the working partner accepts that half of the property he's responsible, something happens for. So half of it becomes a loan, the part that the working partner is accepting responsibility if something happens to it. The other half remains that it belongs to the investing partner, and therefore they divide up half of the profits. But if he's accepting all of the responsibility, if anything happens to the entire thing, he has to pay back the entire amount. So the whole thing is a loan by him. So whatever profits he go to the investing partner is going to be considered as ribis because it's fully a loan. So we say, the Mishnah says you can do so from a guy because there's no issur of ribis by a guy. Aval amru, however, they did say, Hasham para l'chaberoi, someone who evaluates the value of a para and he gives it to dinner, but he says this para is worth 30 dinner, then I'm going to compensate you for if something happens to it. And I'm also going to give you one seller for each month that I have it. Mutter. That is mutter. So why is that mutter? Why don't we have the same problem? He's taking upon himself responsibility, and in addition, he's giving him money. So if he's accepting upon himself full responsibility, then it seems like it's a loan. So how could he also pay him a seller l'chaydish? Because he didn't take upon himself the value of the dam. So but he did. He said that if you evaluate how much it's worth, and then if something happens, so he has to pay back the 30. So he was also dam. What do you mean lo yasa dam? The Gemara says no. Even though he accepted that if something happens to this animal, if the animal dies, I have to pay you back the 30 dinner, but he didn't accept that if the value of the animal goes down, let's say the market value changes, he's not saying I have to return to you. Let's say it goes down to 20, I have to make you whole. He's only accepting upon himself a catastrophic loss. If the thing gets destroyed, then I have to make good on that. But he's not accepting that it's now mine. It's a loiva. It's a halva in my hand. And therefore, I have, like when you borrow, what's the difference between a halva and a pekadon? What's the difference between borrowing and taking a deposit? When you're looking after someone's animal for him, you give back his animal whatever state it's in. When you borrow money, for example, and then you invest the money in something, and at the end of the time, you can't go say, "Oh, I invested and it didn't go well." You have to pay back the full amount. But over here, we're not saying he has to pay him back the full amount. He's paying him back. He gives him back the original investment. And if it went down, meaning in this case, the investment is a para. If it went down in value, it's too bad because it still belonged to the original owner. It wasn't a halva where he has to make good. Now it's true he has to make good if it's fully lost, and that he was makabel on himself. But he wasn't makabel on himself the decrease in value that if the market value went down. So he's only makabel to a certain extent, even though we called it tzoyin barzel. That's true by tzoyin barzel, but he wasn't makabel on himself entirely that whatever happens to it, I'm going to make good.
The cow gets injured, he's makabel that loss?
I don't think so. I think it's only mechayim. It's only as long as it's alive, he can return it as is. Now it's going to depend on whether it's. I think it's going to depend. He's going to be a shema sacha, right? So if it's injured from an einus, then he won't be chayiv. If it's injured from an aveda or gneva, I guess it's not typically how you get injured. It's only if it gets injured by pshia. If he's not careful with it, he's going to be chayiv. He's going to be a shemer, just like a shema sacha. It will depend. So he's not chayiv for damages that happen with ointin. But he is makabel on himself, unlike a typical shemer, he's makabel himself that if it gets killed from an einus, he's going to be chayiv. But that Gemara is saying that doesn't make him into a into a loan as opposed to being a shayma. Amar Papa, Hechas Svina Agra Upagra. The halacha is that you can do this by a svina. You could take upon yourself the agra that you're going to pay a rental, upagra, that if it sinks, you're going to be chayiv, like we said, because he's only accepting upon himself if it sinks. But if it gets damaged or if it goes down in value, he's not. And therefore, he remains a shaymer sacher. He doesn't become a loiva. B'nagu b'nei kufra agra b'shas mashicha, agra b'shas shavira. The b'nei kufra, the people who own boats, they would pay the rental at the time that they take the boat, and paga b'shas shavira. If it broke, if it sunk, they would pay the amount that it cost. What are you saying? You're saying we just said the halacha is like this, then we say the minig is that they did what the halacha is. So no, that's what it means. Because the Mishnah, because we have the halacha, we have a brisa that supports this halacha, so therefore they paskin talk like that, and that's where the minute came. Amar Rav Anan Amar Shmuel. Now I'm going to turn to a dinim of Yisayim. Mois shall Yisayim mutal halvoisim beribis. A yasim, you're allowed to lend his money beribis. The yasim, we're talking about a yasim who's a katan. A katan is nach mechuyev b'mitzvahs. So he doesn't have a mitzvah that he can't lend beribis. And since we want to help Yisayim, we don't impose on them. We allow their money to be lent with ribis. Rashi Taisus has a good point. Who are they lending this ribis to? As we know, there's a chiyuv both on the person lending and on the person paying. So if you look at the bottom of the Taisus Moishel Yisayim, he asks this case, and he answers, he says there's no chiyuv of that you're not allowed to pay ribis unless there's an isser for the lender to lend with ribis. The two are linked. So if the lender has no din ribis, so then even though from the leiber's perspective, from the borrower's perspective, he's paying ribis and he's a gadol, it's not a problem.
There's no problem with chinuch? Yeah.
I think someone's doing it on their behalf. So there is a problem with chinuch. I think the Rishonim talk about that we're worried about that. There's other mandam who say you can't do it. It's only where it's not a ribis ktsutza. It's a derabanan dika ribis, so it's less of a chinuch problem. But yeah, or maybe it's because other people do it on their behalf, so they're not mechunach to do it. Like we're going to see later on in the Gemara, you appoint people to do the lending. We do it with iska. We'll see. It's not kamachlekes amiroim whether you have to get bezdin to do it and use hefker bezdin hefker to do it. Zok the Gemara. Amalei Rav Nachman Yaakov was not happy with this. He said, like you, Rishum the Yasmininu Sfinu Lahu Yisura, because the Yisayim, we could feed them Isser. Yasmi the Achli, the Lav Didu, Leis Lubasa Shuvkayu. Yisayim will eat that which is not theirs, meaning they're eating ribis, they're consuming they're living off of ribis. They're going to join the person who made them into a Yasam, meaning the father who died, they're going to die like him. Rashi says. So he said to Rav Anan, who said B'Shem Shmuel, tell me exactly where you got this idea that Yisayim can lend with ribis. It doesn't sound fishy to me. Amalei, who do the Bnei Mar Ukva? There was this large boiler of the sons of Mar Ukva, the Havim Bey Mar Shmuel, and Shmuel was the one who was taking care of it for them. Takel v'yavle, takel v'shakale. So he would lend out this dud, this boiler, this large pot, and he would weigh it beforehand and weigh it after. So he got paid for any decrease in the in what was left of the in this pot, each time it was used, some of the copper was worn away. He would calculate that. So shakel agav shakel pischa, and he would do it as a iska, and he would get both a rental for this duda, and he would also, you see, be taking the whole pras, whatever it went down in value. And we said before, when you have an iska where you take the pras, where you take when it goes down in value, right? This is not just that if it gets ruined, he's going to take it. He's saying, I'm going to take the pras where it goes down in value. And we had just determined on the previous plot that when you take that, that transforms it, instead of being a investment together with a loan, the whole thing becomes a loan. If you're taking the pischa, if you're taking the decrease in value, if the managing partner is responsible to pay back whatever loss there is, then it becomes a loan to him, and then whatever profit he pays to the owning partner is ribbis. So they would be accepting ribbis. So we have that same problem. Amalei, so he said to him, no, in the case of these copper pots, even it's not just a yasim that you're allowed to do this. Even an older person, you could do this. Let me have it. He says, in addition to the fact that some of the nechoshes gets worn out, and he's accepting that, he's also, so that's how he's accepting upon himself the pchas. And the reason why he's taking a rental is because every time you use a copper pot, it gets a little bit discolored, it gets corroded. So in addition to it gets worn out and there's less copper there, what is left, even the copper that's left, gets a little worse, and therefore you have to pay a rental. So everything is being paid for what the person is experiencing a loss. There's just two different types of losses that happen to the copper pot. Some of it we're calling pischa, it loses some of the copper, and the rental is for the fact that it becomes worth less each time you use it. I guess a way to think of it, like let's say someone rents a car, you have to pay both for the miles, and if like there's dings on the car, you have to pay for those also. So someone pays he pays a rental for the miles that he's using, and in addition, he has to pay for any dings. But that doesn't make it into any part. No part of it is ribbis. It's all compensation for the use. Amar Rabba Bar Shila Amar Rav Kuzda, Amila Amar Rabba Bar Yosef Bar Chama Amar Rav Sheshes. Mois shal Yisayim. Money of Yisayim. Motel havoisam karav l'schav arakak lehefsed. When we make an iska, we always say that you have to balance. It has to be that the schar is half, that you get half of the profits, and he only takes on half of the responsibility. The managing partner is only responsible for half of the losses. But by a yasim, he can get more than 50% of the profits and less than half of the responsibility for the hefsid, like we said before. That since this is, Rashi gives a long explanation, since this is not ribbis mamish, since it's not certain that he's going to get a profit, so it's only avak ribbis. On a yasim, it doesn't apply. Tanarabban, karv l'schav v'rochut lahefsid rasha. Someone who's not a yasim, a regular person, if he makes that deal that we just described, where he's getting more than 50% of the profits and less than half 50%, he's responsible for less than 50% of of the property. So then it turns out, let's say he's taking on 25% of the property. The managing partner is only taking 25%. So then, Rachak Lehefsed means he's taking on more than 20. He's taking on 75% of the hefsed. And Karav L'Schar, and the owner is getting 75% of the profit. So it turns out 75% is lent to the managing partner. And even so, the owner, the investor, is getting 75% of the profits. That's very much like ribbis. He's getting an increased share of the profits, and he only retains in his possession 25% of the deal. The other 75% is a loan, and he's getting and he's still getting 75% of the profits, that's ribis. So he's a Rosh if he does that. If he does it the other way around, he says, I want to be extra careful. I'm going to take upon myself, the owner says, I'm taking upon myself that you only have to pay me back 40% of damage that happens. And I'm only going to take for myself 25% of the profits. So then he's chassid. He's a chassid. He's very far from taking ribis. He's getting 25% of the profit, and the other person is getting 60% as a loan. Karav lezeh ulezeh. If he makes both the same, meaning he says, I want 25%, the hefsid, I'm going to take upon myself that 70, let's say, I'm taking upon myself that I'm getting 75% of the, you were responsible for 75%. So I am only going to, I'm sorry, the other way around. You are taking upon yourself 25%. You, the managing partner, taking upon 25% alone. So I am responsible for the other 75%, but I'm also taking 75% of the profits. Or if it's 25%, 20%, that's regular. As long as it's the same, as long as they're equal, the amount that the managing partner is responsible for, and the amount of profits, whether it's 25% or 50% or 75%, doesn't make a difference. As long as the loan, he's getting profits according to whatever's not a loan. That's okay. Rabba said to Rabbi Yosef, so what do we do with the money of Yisayim? You give it to the Bezdin, but Bezdin appoints, or the Bezdin themselves, or they appoint someone, and you give them, you appoint a guardian, and the guardian gives them money to live on. If you do that, if they're just living off of the actual estate, just going to get used up, and there's not going to be anything left. You got to invest it. So he said to him, so what do you do? You find someone that has loose gold. It's a guy who has a mamish gold sitting around, gold bars. And Bezdin takes, or the Yisrael Bezdin takes some of these gold bars from him. And then this person does a deal. This person does a deal with the Yisraelim, where the Yisraelim are getting, let's say, they're entitled to 75% of the profits. But this person accepts upon himself, 90% of the possible damage, which we said would, under normal circumstances, if it wasn't Yisayimim, would be treated as avak ribis. But since it's Yisayimim, we allow him to do it, and the gold, as Rashi explains, that's just to be able to enforce it against this guy, make sure he's going to have the money to pay back the Yisayimim at the end. That's just, we want to make sure it's a guy who's very liquid. And the Gemara continues, if he doesn't have actual gold, but all he has is property, he has stuff. It's a guy who has a fancy house on Iron East 8th, a huge house filled with tapestries and paintings, and he has a Volvo in front. Like, Dilma Pikadninu, maybe it's all borrowed. But Asi Mare, somebody's going to come and repossess all his stuff. The Gemara says that when you're doing this, when you're finding the person to go into an iska with the assignment, we want to make money for the assignment, we want to make sure that this person will be easy for Bezdin to go to get what that this guy will pay up what he's responsible to pay. So you make sure it's a person who's liquid, not someone who has a bunch of things on lease. Because then if it's on lease, when you come to get money from him, we'll say it's nothing here, and everyone will come and take away all this stuff. Amar Ravashi, says that's very good. So you have this very fine idea that you're going to support the assignment by going into an iska with someone that has plenty of loose liquidity, lose cash. So well, then what you're going to do? Then you're going to go back to the original plan. You're just going to eat up the cash. We want to be able to make it realistic that you're going to be able to invest the money of this. And you're making this only in this ideal situation that a very liquid guy is willing to enter into a iska that's not at great terms. In the end, what you're just going to end up doing is not finding anyone to invest with, and you're going to be left having the Islam meet up the money. Elam Ravashi, Chazin and Gavra, the Mashpu Nechsel, we find a person, he doesn't have to be mamish, rolling in cash, but he's someone that has assets. He has karka, or mehemen, and he's trustworthy. The shaman be the Araisa, he's a Shemer Teru Mitzvahs, the Loy Mekabel Shamta the Rabbanan, he's never been in trouble with the Rabbanan, they haven't had to put him in Cherem. And as a final rule, we give it, Rashi says, you give it to him in front of Bezdin, it's like Rashi Beidina, B'fnei Bezdin, Sheishon Kayach Lahafka Nichse Hamakabel Eitzel Yisem, Lastly Mekarv L'Schar V'Rachik Lahafsid. Rashi says you have to do this in Bezdin in order, it's not enough to just say that since it's a Avak Ribis, therefore you can do it for Yisaimim. It has to be done in Bezdin with the Kayach of Hefker Bezdin Hefker. That's the way you're able to take away from this person, even with ribs. Zoktamish. This is what we saw. We saw the Gemara before had referenced this. Ein mekabelin soim barzem liyisrael. Neshu ribis. One cannot enter into an iska with a yid, meaning, let's say Ruvain is Shimon has a property and he wants to enter into an iska with Ruvain. Shimon can't say that I'm giving you this money to divide half of the profits, but you have to provide me same barzel, that you have to pay the entire amount to me if something happens to it. Because, like we said, then the whole thing is a loan and it's us. But you can do so from a guy. So Rashi says, like we said, he's makabel himself the entire responsibility. The Mishnah is saying, even though this is unnecessary. So Rashi is asking, we already learned the din of an iska, and the iska is that he can only accept half of the responsibility. So why do we have to now go and say, if you take on the whole responsibility, it's also to do with the yid? So Rashi says, we're only saying it because it's it's only for the purpose of telling you the second din that you can be makabel from an akum. Taisa says a different shot. I don't remember where he said it. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, Zok the Mishnah weiter. The love and mehen, you can borrow from them. You can lend to Goyim, to Nachrim, and you could borrow from them, and you could lend to them with ribs. Also with a ger toshev. A ger toshev doesn't mean a ger who's makabel Torah mitzvahs. It means someone who lives in Eretz Yisrael who's makabel sheva mitzvahs b'neinayach, but he remains a guy. You can borrow and lend from him with ribs. Mal v'yisrael ma'osav shel akom midas ha'akom. If a yid borrowed from a guy, Reuben borrowed from Tom, and then Shimon wants to borrow that money. Reuben wants to assign that money that he borrowed from Tom to Shimon. He can do so if Tom is agreeable. Basically, Tom is saying instead of Reuben owing me the money, Shimon should owe me the money, but it's still a loan to the Akum. Avaloi midas Yisrael, meaning if a yid had lent money to a guy, which is with ribis, and that's allowed, and now the guy wants to assign it over to a yid, so now it will end up that the yid is owing the first yid. He can't do it midas Yisrael, meaning if Reuven lent to Tom money with ribis, and now Tom wants to assign it to Shimon, so Tom could do it if Tom says, I'm going to just lend money to Shimon. then Shimon owes the money to Tom, and it's not a problem. But if he goes to his original lender, to Reuven, and he says, Tom says to him, I want the money to be owed to you from Shimon, then it now becomes Shimon owes Reuven the money with ribbis, which is not allowed. So Gemara asked, and we said, you can't be Makabel Tzayim Barzal Yisrael. So Gemara questions, when someone takes something, where the borrower is responsible to fully compensate for any losses, does that mean that now it's in the reshus of the makabel, and now the makabel owns it, and he has a chiyuv to pay the person whatever the value was? Do we say that he now owes the person the value of what it was that he borrowed, or do we say no, that the original thing still belongs to the original owner, and he just has to pay back if something happens to it? He has to make good if it's destroyed, but the original item still belongs to the original. So remember the reshus of the makabel. So we seem to be saying it's aser because it belongs in the reshus of the makabel. The managing partner, the working partner, now owns it, and therefore it becomes. That's what we said. It's ribbis. Raminu hamakabel tzayim barzal min hanachrim. Someone who took from nachrim with a din of tzayim barzal, he has to compensate fully the nachri for what he took, and he took a cow from them. Vlad is p'turim min habachayra. The vlad that now is by this Jew, this Yid, who is the working partner, who's now responsible to pay back the nachri fully if something happens to it, it's not going to be mechuyev in the din b'char. The din b'char only applies to something that's fully owned by a Yid. We say since this is owned by the guy, there's no din b'char. So we see that even though it has a din of tzayim barzel, that the Yid has to fully compensate if something happens. We don't say it fully belongs to the Yid in the sense that it should mechuyev and have a din of b'char. Amar Avaya, so the Avaya says no, loy kash. It's not true. This is not shver. It could be, while it's true that the din of tzayim barzel makes it that he's fully responsible, it still could be that he's mechuyev to. It's going to be part of him b'chayra. Ha de makabel einse v'zula. Ha de loy makabel einse v'zula. It depends on what was he makabel with the tzayim barzel. What is he makabel? Both any einsim, meaning if it gets destroyed, like we had before by the ship, and does he also accept upon himself if it goes down in value? When he's makabel tzayim barzel, he's not. He could return the actual thing. He often can return the actual thing, even if it goes down in value. So when did we say it still belongs to the guy? It's where he wasn't makabel both facets. He didn't say that both if it gets destroyed and if it goes down in value, I'm responsible. Rather, he only took one of them. If we're talking about where the original owner was under certain circumstances not going to be made whole, why would you call it tzayim barzel? The whole point of tzayim barzel, what does tzayim barzel mean? It's iron sheep. It's like he's fully protected. He's not fully protected if he has to accept upon himself depreciation, or he has to accept upon himself if it gets destroyed. It shouldn't be called tzayim barzel. Why do we have to say in the Mishnah that there are cases where you can lend with tzayim barzel? If he accepted one of those things upon himself, then it's no longer fully a full loan, and therefore it could be lent. He could accept the ribbis or the profit. Shapadam. Both of them are talking about where he wasn't makabel any. The original owner was not makabel any responsibility. This is the reason why it's part of abachar. If he doesn't provide money, the guy can come and grab back the behemoth. If you can't find the behemoth, he'll take the vladis. The hand of the nachri is still involved over here. He still has a lien on this behemoth, even though he's given it fully over and he's fully protected no matter what happens. But if the person does not have money, doesn't have cash, he can go seize that behemoth. So that means the yad of the behemoth of the nafri is still involved, and that's enough. A whole yad nafri b'emsa potem nabachayra. That is enough to take it that it's not going to be chayv and b'chayr. It still has a din of a nafri involved. Okay, shkoyach.